Hello and welcome. Today we are talking about childhood memories and being reflective in the writing you do today about past events. I'm Melody Ann, your host. Have you heard of community-based publishing? If you have a book in you, Author Nation will help you create a roadmap to success. Then join our community where you get the structure, the accountability, the information, and the inspiration to finish your book and publish it. So grab our planning checklist, and it is scrolling past you right now. You'll also find the link in the description, and that'll get you a good start. Okay, our guest today. After a rewarding career in education, Patti completed journalism school in Vancouver, Canada, at the age of 60, and then began her career as an adventure travel writer. She published her first book at 73. Patti and her husband still ski, paddle, and trek. Their last trek was 25 days around the challenging Manaslu circuit in Nepal, topping out at a high pass of 16,700 feet. The trek included a side trek to the unspoiled Soom Valley, opened to tourists in 2008. They were 71 at the time. Please welcome Patti. Hi, Patti. How are you today?
Hi, Melody. Good to see you.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Last time you were here, we talked about your trekking and your nonprofit that came out of that. So could you catch us up on the nonprofit?
Well, two major things, really. The school, with the help of Kalamalka Rotary in Vernon, British Columbia, and a cast of thousands, we raised enough to build an 8-classroom school. That's done. The Japanese International Cooperation Agency, JICA, added 8 more classrooms. So now we have kindergarten to grade 10 school with 350 students. And that school did not exist because of the 2015 earthquake. And just last year, we got computer stations put in. The village just received electricity in 2018. So now there's the 17 computer stations, lighting in the classrooms, which is exciting because they can close the open windows at, when it gets dark late afternoon, actually be able to close the windows, and a full Montessori kindergarten, which was the kindergarten children had absolutely nothing. And
wow.
That's going well. We also, it's not a Rotary project, but many Rotarians are involved in a home building project for 2 families that needed homes. They're low caste families. That doesn't, the caste system was abolished in 1963 in Nepal, but in a lot of rural villages it still holds. So there's a single mom who is mute with a daughter, and we're building a house for her. She does work some for other families, but it's hard to get work. And the other one is for a young man and his family and 2 daughters. His name is Krishna, and he's a blacksmith. And I'm happy to say that we started construction on December 8th, and the walls are up, and I'm getting reports all the time. So it's pretty exciting.
That's amazing. Wonderful. And what about the trekking? How are you trekking? Are you planning for a trek? How's that going?
Yes, we are. We're planning to do parts of the Great Himalayan Trail that we have not completed yet. It goes from one end of Nepal to the other, 1,500K. We've covered about 700K over 3 trips, and there's 800 left, obviously. So that's what we're training for now. So we're training by cross-country skiing here, snowshoeing, here being Silver Star Mountain, where we live. Putting skins on our skis and trekking uphill to the summit and then skiing down, and hiking in the parks in regular neighborhood around here and the provincial parks. And it's kind of neat because our house sits at 5,200 feet. And so when we skin up or we ski the higher trails, we're at 6,200. And I think that does help with the altitude adjustments. So
Yeah.
to be here.
Yeah. So no ski lifts for you.
Well, yes, sometimes. It seems to be embarrassed to be seen on a ski lift. Now I take one once in a while.
No, yes, okay, but training means maybe not taking the ski lift for a while until you're ready. That's amazing. And so before we get into the book, can you just give us a quick summary from teacher to founder of a nonprofit? Like, how did that come together?
Yeah, amazing. A surprise to me too. You never know what's going to happen in your life. I started as a teacher in Toronto in a pretty posh neighborhood, 6 years there, and I loved it. And then I saw the light and moved west. Probably that was influenced by the year I spent in Switzerland. I did Ontario grade 13 in Switzerland. And I kind of always longed for the mountains. So I moved west, and then I taught in Vancouver as a teacher and then as a principal, mostly in the inner city area, the downtown east side area, for the next 20 years. But I'd always wanted to be a writer. So when I retired, I took 6 months off, and then I went to journalism school for the year. And then I started freelancing, which was a real stretch. It was very, very hard. The rejection was not good at first. And I freelanced for quite a while. And then we started these adventure trips to write about. And the second trip I went on solo in 2014. And I was a volunteer teacher, and then I trekked for a couple of months on my own. And near the village where I was teaching, I was taken to another village that needed some help. They asked if I would help them build a new school. And I left there feeling like an imposter. I just went, they must think all Westerners are rich or something. But then kind of thought about it, over the trip and got some inspiration. And then in 2014, later that year, we formed a nonprofit. And then in 2015, early, an earthquake hit Nepal and 8,000 people were killed. That village and the one I was volunteering in were right at the epicenter. So the village that asked for my help, every house was ruined. And the old school that was already falling down totally fell down. And I also joined Rotary that year. And then we started to get going. And then I wrote the first book, Nepal One Day at a Time, which tells that story. And all book profits go toward the school, back to the nonprofit.
Yeah, that's an amazing, you can retire, and you were in a place where you could have retired and just, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to put my feet up, but you didn't. And you've had this whole second career and all these adventures. And I admire that. And I think that's so much fun. But your new book, Grounded by Granite, is really a prequel to your first book. So why did you decide to kind of go back and write a memoir about your earlier years?
Well, as with many people, it's partly for family. I'd been writing kind of cottage stories for years for magazine articles and just for fun. And also I wanted to build on what my grandfather left. He was a teacher and a principal, actually, high school. And he gave all the background of this 5 generations before my family, of the Shales family. And so I wanted to build on that a bit too. My brother's kind of the photographer in the family, so we put things together. I also kept getting asked, people that read Nepal One Day at a Time would say, well, how'd you get to be that kind of person who would go off on your own and, solo trek and 3 months in the wilderness and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, well, maybe people could learn from this. This is the kind of thing that cottage time and camping at first, even all of that wonderful childhood really gave me the grounds to be able to, and the resilience to be able to do these things.
Yeah. So
it's also for parents. I want parents to read it and find out what it's like to keep their kids outdoors, get them away from screen time and all of the interesting skills and activities that are out there. And you don't have to be at a cottage. It could be your backyard or a park in Toronto.
Yeah. So what is that big question then that you're trying to answer in the book?
I guess it's letting people know about the benefits of being outdoors and in nature, and also the benefit of extended family. If you have an extended family or can be connected to those members of the extended family, it gives your kids amazing resilience and strength. One quick story, I remember one time my great nephew had learned to dive off the dock at my sister's cottage, which was close to ours. And he's about 35 or 40 now, but this is the story. When he was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and he learned to dive. Well, of course, he had his mom and dad, everybody cheering, and his younger brother and sister. And then they ran down to our cottage and got my husband and I, get Auntie P, she'll come and see, and then get great grandpa. And all of those people giving that background and sense of belonging that really helps kids grow up strong, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Being celebrated and cheered on by a whole crowd of people. Right. So I don't have a big extended family. So I'm listening here going, oh, wouldn't that be lovely? Right.
Well, not everybody does, but
exactly.
As many, and you know what? Family is not always blood family either. It's the family that you make with your friends. So it's those other people that make you, back up the kids. Yeah. And also I want to let parents know that there's other things. There's other things they can do. And also, I was very, very impressed with the confidence my mom in particular had in us, because once we learned to swim, and it's 40 feet, it's 40 feet deep right off our island. Once we learned to swim, we stayed all summer with my mom, and dad would just come for weekends and holidays. And our playground was half of a lake, because the word was, as long as I can see you from the front rock, which was in front of the cottage, you can go anywhere you want. And she had that confidence in us to row and, go fishing or whatever. So.
Yeah. And I relate to that. I grew up on a farm, and, they kind of opened up the back door and threw us out, right? Hey, yeah. Go play, come back when you're hungry. Yeah. That's kind of how I grew up, right? So you're hoping parents read this book.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And, it wasn't just summer. I was thinking about being thrown out the back door. That was in the winter too. My dad we didn't have a big backyard, but he would freeze that, and we would use it as a skating rink, or we would spend hours out there building forts and snowballs and having wars with the neighbor kids, or road hockey on the front, on the road, actually, on our street. Just being outside.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me where I grew up in Ontario, on a farm. I always joke that we had to have doors on 3 sides of the house, because you never knew snow drifts could easily cover up two doors, right? So you always had to have doors on 3 sides of a house, so there's always a way out, right? That's how much snow we had. But I really love the snow. So tell us a little bit about what the reader's going to find between the pages here.
Well, I guess a bit of history of the cottage life in the 50s. It's, there's going to find a bit of nostalgia, other ways of doing things. It's for cottagers. It's not only for cottagers, it's for people dreaming of having a cottage, people who used to have a cottage or went when they were kids. It's stories about the 50s and what it was like and what kind of things we ate and did on the island, in and around the lake, in the rural area, and also in a couple of the cities, and what that was like. Kingston, Ontario was the closest city.
Oh, Kingston. Okay. Yes. So do we need to live a life like yours to be resilient, Patti?
No. I think there's many, many opportunities out there for children and for young adults and youth if they take them. There's all kinds of parks in cities. We have great park areas, and as long as the parents feel safe having the kids there or going with them, even better. There's a lot, in education, I did a lot of work taking kids outdoors. There are a lot of school programs available in elementary school as well, and high school for camping. And there's often bursaries. Parents only need to ask, so it's not a matter of money. There's a great number of community programs in places like the YMCA for camping and hiking. There's also programs that are aimed at kids in poverty and at-risk youth. There's one called Project Canoe in Ontario that takes kids on week-long trips, and many kids are on bursaries with that program. Outward Bound Canada also has bursaries. And, another thing, not just outdoor activities, but family time together. There are a lot of, it seems, cropping up a lot of restaurants and bookstores that will have game nights where families can get together and do board games, which is what we did at night at the cottage. So, there are those opportunities out there. Mostly it's about connection. And if you're extended families in another province or another country, we have such great communication now. It doesn't have to be, in person. Getting grandma or great grandpa on the phone or FaceTime or Zoom and saying, look what so-and-so did today and how wonderful they are. Or tell your grandpa about this or that, just that connection.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is resilience isn't necessarily about being outdoors, but it is about having the freedom to try, to make mistakes, to explore, and at the same time as having that freedom, having the support system behind you to celebrate you when you do really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Hannah Jacobson is watching today and says, lovely stories and helpful resources shared. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah, for joining us today. I really, really love that. And, I'm just realizing that some people aren't going to know why it's called Grounded by Granite. So can you just, I know why, because we're both from Ontario, but I just realized that might be. So can you tell us a little bit about why Grounded by Granite?
Well, here's the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And on the cover, this is what it says. A coming of age tale of family connection and personal resilience framed by the summers on a remote island in the Canadian Shield. And the Canadian Shield is granite. And it's a huge area that encompasses, Algonquin Park and many parks. So it's warming your toes on the front swimming rock in the morning when it's warm from the sun, and being grounded that way, knowing that that's your home place. I'm sixth generation on that lake. Very lucky. Mm-hmm.
That area of Canada called the Canadian Shield is just like one big rock. Exactly. Underneath all the trees and the lakes is just one big rock.
Which is, makes it terrible farming. My ancestors came to be farmers, and they certainly eked out an existence. And part of that resilience in me, I'm sure, comes from them, because they farmed that Canadian Shield, and it's not the best place to farm.
No. No, it isn't. So I love that you lived on a place called Loon Island. I also grew up in Ontario, and the call of the loon for me is the most magical moment. What other magic lived in your childhood?
Ooh. I think just being in the water 3 or 4 times a day. Learning to swim was huge. I'm the youngest of 3. So my dad standing on the drop-off of where the water goes from 3 feet down a cliff to 40 feet deep. And the big deal was to be able to go swim around him over what we called the black water. And when I could do that, that felt magic. That was amazing.
And powerful.
Sorry?
And powerful.
Yes. That I could, and then sometimes, we would go every year. We would go back 24th of May weekend, open the cottage. And even at that age, I would run right into the water and then realize, I hope I can remember how to swim after all the winter, because we never went to pools. So
right. Yeah, it's pretty cold up there, isn't it?
We spent a lot of time catching frogs and fishing and building sand castles and making forts up in the island. It seemed very mysterious to go to the middle of the island. Is about 4 acres. It's not a large island.
Tiny,
It seemed really amazing to go to the other side of the island.
Yeah.
And learning to row with my grandma and learning to paddle a canoe with my dad. He was a canoe guide during university in Algonquin Park. So canoeing was big in our family and still is.
Beautiful. And Hannah's saying thank you. Beautiful. Thank you for the explanation. A suiting cover and book title for sure. Because, Grounded by Granite, that's actually quite a local, everyone local would get that. Mm-hmm. So if you're out there and you'd like to know more about Patti, you can find more about Patti at PattiShalesLefkos.com. And I'm sure there's information not only about her books, but also the nonprofit and how you can get involved in that if that's something that interests you. So Patti, this is your second book. Mm-hmm. Did you bring many lessons from your first book project to this book project?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Had to, because I knew nothing before. I mean, that never occurred to me to write a book before the first one.
Yeah. So what?
Yeah, I learned about word count for a total book, what kind of length would be good for chapters, that a narrative arc is necessary. You can't just lather on forever with stories. There has to be some kind of tension. In Grounded by Granite, the tension is that we owned the island, and then it was questioned, and then could we afford to keep it? And there was a lot of tension before I was 15 years old about, how could the government ever think of taking our island, which was of course our island, but there were parts in there like that. So I learned how to build a narrative arc. I think I got better learning that a book should be a series of scenes with some description between, but there's got to be the scenes to keep people with you at all times. And how to link up the scenes. Sometimes white space was good.
Yeah.
And then, one thing I learned too is to read over many, many, many drafts. You get a first edit, and then of course you have to get people to go over it many times and proofread at every single stage. And there are still a couple of typos in Nepal One Day at a Time, which drives me insane. But I think Grounded by Granite doesn't have any. So,
right.
Yeah. It's, I guess just I learned to plan my time too. After Sam on draft 3 or 4, and we'd be at the cottage, and I'd want to go out on my stand-up paddleboard and do other things. But I would just say, okay, 2 hours in the morning, and I'm going to do this many chapters, review or rewrite or whatever, and that helps. Having a schedule, I'm on my own. I'm on my own schedule because I self-publish. There's no deadline, and that really helps too. But I set myself deadlines. Otherwise, it would never happen. So I think this many hours to do this, and that'll extend over 3 months. And then, so the timing, I learned a lot about the timing.
Yeah. It sounds like one of the big things, so storytelling, it sounds like, you've learned a lot about storytelling and the narrative arc and, the scenes, having different scenes and pulling them together to create the story. And then on top of that, kind of being your own boss, right? So when you first publish a book, if you're self-publishing, you have no idea how long anything takes.
Yeah.
And the project just seems to go on forever and ever and ever, like there's never any end. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people give up. Mm-hmm. It's like they get overwhelmed, they get frustrated, they don't really have milestones to measure it by. So when your second one, did you kind of set out some milestones? It's like, okay, I have to write this many chapters, and then I need to do this much editing, and you knew how long it was going to take. Did you kind of set yourself a plan and then a schedule?
Yes, and my thing is I get up at 6 o'clock every morning. I do some meditation, journal writing, about a half an hour of stretch and strength exercises, yoga stuff. Then I have breakfast, and I treat it like a business. I have to report to my desk by 9 o'clock. Yeah. And that's like 5 days a week. And it's not the 5 days and then the weekend. It's whatever 5 days I have when I'm not doing other volunteer work or something. Yeah, and then I try and say I'm going to do this many chapters this week or next week. And it's, the first draft should be ready by this time.
Right. And so, and that's it. That's what I often tell people, treat it like a business. You are an employee of the book business, and you need to say, I'm going to write for 2 hours a day, or I'm going to do marketing for 2 hours a day, or I'm, whatever it happens to be. And you found that really helpful then. I'm glad.
Yeah. And also, I made my own deadlines because the time to bring out a cottage book is in April when everybody's thinking about opening up the cottages, right? So that meant I had to back up a long way. And I've learned this from writing for magazines. 6 months ahead, you have to pitch to a magazine. Would you like to can I do this story about such and such that has to do with the new book? So all of that has to be backed up and thought about ahead. And also the marketing on Facebook. And I don't do Instagram, but I do a lot on Facebook. So, little giving people little ideas about what's coming.
Yeah.
And with the first book too, I I had to find all the people to work with. With the second book, I already had an editor that I liked. I had a designer who was recommended by Okanagan Life magazine, and I used to write for them a lot. So I used her for both books. And at a conference at one point before the first book, I heard a distributor talking, and he said, beware of a lot of these self-publishing businesses. All you need is a good cover, a good editor, and a good designer. Well, and a community to help you. But that stuff I already figured out with the first one.
Yeah. So it took less energy the second time than it did the first time.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no?
Well, no. You know what? Did it take less energy? No.
No. Okay. Even though you didn't have to find people. You already had people on your team.
For that part of it, yeah. I mean, yeah, I knew how to plan the 6 months ahead, and plan one on launch date, and
Yeah. And it reminds me that, a lot of self-published authors come to me and say, oh, traditional publishing just takes so long. Yes. And what you're saying is, look, if you want to be in a magazine about your book, that takes 6 months worth of planning.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And so it kind of puts into perspective why traditional publishing takes so long. They spend a lot of time planning this book marketing, and they do it really well. And so self-published authors, if they want the same level of success, then they need to put in that same level of planning. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Hannah, takes a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly.
But it can be really fun. I love inventing things for Facebook that are not just, hi, here's my book, buy it. But, oh, did you know that, with the first book, I did a whole series of trekking tips.
Nice.
Or Grounded by Granite, I do bits about cottage life, and is your cottage open yet, and blah, blah, that kind of thing. Yeah. So you have to make it interesting and worthwhile for the readers, too.
And that's a great segue for Hannah's question. What is your favorite part of the process?
Receiving the sample copy from the printer, and you see what it looks like. That's really exciting. Really exciting. And then, of course, you think that's when it's really stressful, because that's your last chance to read it through again and check for typos. And in the first book, the last 5 pages of the book were mixed up.
Oh,
I have no idea how it happened, but I caught it. Luckily, I went right through every single page, and they just put something out of order, but it didn't make sense. So.
Yeah, I love that. It's my favorite part, and it's the most stressful.
You know you're getting somewhere, right?
Right. It's too. So this book moves from past events to present day reflections. So I really want to talk about that and how you put that together for the reader, and advice for other writers who want to kind of delve into the past and bring it into the present and reflect on it.
Well, first, and not purposefully, but it turned out I read several books that switched back in time, other novels. And I was fascinated by how they did it, and the little clues for the reader every time you start a new chapter as to where you are. And that was while I was starting to write this book. And when I first started, it was going to be, kind of chronological chapters from 1946 to 1958 when I was 13. And then, but every time I'd start to write about what happened in the early days, things would trigger from my memory from today, or that relates to this, and those chapters got long and very confusing. So I thought I have to split it up. And at first I wanted it to be, here's a chapter of, say, the year 1948 summer, and here's a reflection. And then the next reflection after the next chapter, I wanted to be chronological, but it didn't work because something had happened in the second year we were there, didn't relate. It didn't all happen chronologically. So the regular chapters that tell the story are all chronological. The reflections are present or near present. They might have been 3 years before and not today. Yeah. And so I thought there has to be, and I sent it out to beta readers, about 10 beta readers who were cottagers or not, outdoor people or not. And and I sent it out in chunks. And after the first chunk, which was 4 chapters with following reflections, they really liked it and they understood. But what I did I worked on this and played around so many times. The chapter that tells the story is in past tense. The reflection after it is in italics. It also starts with a date, and it is in present tense, even if it's like 2 years before.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of triggers the reader each time as to where you are. And it seems that people like that and have enjoyed that. And a psychologist friend of mine who actually endorsed the book did say that that's exactly how memories trigger, and that it did work out. Yeah. So she understood it very well. And
Yeah. So you have a set of chapters
Mhm.
that are all in chronological order.
Yeah.
And they're all in the past. And that piece is the narrative arc. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then the ones that are interspersed, like it's the odd chapters like 1, 3, 5, 7 that are past tense. 2, 4, 6, 8 are the italics reflections. They're often a little bit shorter, but they say something that's happened lately that's refers to that. It was an easier way. Otherwise I would have had one long narrative and then one really long reflection of update about where's the family, what's happened to the cottages, blah blah.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
parents dying, my
Mm.
sister died, what happened to her cottage, all of that. It was
Mhm.
much, and it was a way to introduce other family members as well, introduce the other characters, and then let people know what happened to them.
Okay.
They're in these scenes that are reflective scenes.
Yeah. And so the reflective chapters are not in chronological order. So the past is all in chronological order, but the reflective chapters are not in chronological order. So how did you decide what order to put those in?
It was whatever related to the actual chapter. For instance, the first chapter is about
Got it.
going to our island for the very first time, and that's this on the front cover. I'm the little one in the middle. So that's the story of the first day that we went to the island. Yeah. The reflection on that is that we're all sitting over at my brother's cottage, which belonged to my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to find that photo, and we're talking about it. And it also, so some of the characters are there. The spouses are now there. And so that introduces the other people and where we are now, but it also brings us back to looking for the old photos and remembering that day.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you for explaining that to us. I know there are other people who want to tell a story and then reflect on it. And it's nice to hear how one person has done it successfully. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. So when do you leave for your next trek?
In probably mid to late August.
Mid to late August.
Yeah. As usual, we'll go. We're very lucky. We get to go to the cottage for the summer. So we have our own cottage on that island now that my husband built for us. It's not Muskoka. It's not rich. It's very simple, but it's beautiful. So we'll go there for 3 or 4 months, and then we'll come back and have 2 weeks at home at Silver Star and have done some packing and organizing already. And then we'll head out for Nepal for about 4.5, 5 months. We want to do the higher parts of the route first because we don't want to be snowed in to certain areas. And you can get snowed in to certain areas very early. For example, in 2011, we went on the Annapurna circuit and did a high pass called Thorong La, which is, I think, about 17,000 feet. And we went over the pass on October 10th that year. 5 years later, there was a massive snowstorm, blizzard that killed a lot of people on the same date.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
We you have to go early to certain areas and be careful of the altitude, of course, and the snow.
Yeah. And so from now until then, you are running, hiking, skiing. What are all the things that fit into this getting ready for? Yeah.
Well, one thing I'm doing fitness-wise, we're cross-country skiing, putting skins on to climb up the hill, snowshoeing, walking on the snowshoe trails, depending on, my goal is to kind of do 2 hours a day, 5 days a week at least. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes a little bit shorter, but it gets us out. Because I have this one quote that people might like. I can't remember where I heard it. Discipline is remembering what you want.
Yeah, I love it.
Say that to myself, and I think, oh no, I'd really rather sit and read in front of the fireplace. No, what do I really want? I want to be able to go to Nepal and be comfortable and not, because I'll be 77 when we go.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so lots of activity like that. In the summer, we do a lot of. It's harder to train for trekking at the cottage. Mostly it's water sports. So, some distance swimming, paddleboard, canoeing, lovely country roads to walk on. We'll have to do more of that. There's no hills, as you know, it's Ontario, but yeah. So
lots of different activities to get ready for it. Perfect. All right. Excellent.
Well, and also writing. Like this morning I was writing. I've started the book already because part of it is about the parts of the Great Himalayan Trail that we've already trekked.
Right.
And lessons learned from that. So the book starts, a chapter I was starting this morning about trekking in Tibet in 2009 when one of our party actually died of altitude sickness.
Oh, wow. So, yes.
How that could have been prevented and what to look for and what we learned from that experience.
Yeah. Brilliant. You're right. You're already on your next book. I think that's amazing. Where can we get the 2 books that you already have out?
Well, they're available on Amazon, but I would, of course, rather you order them from a local bookstore. And, Indigo has them in a lot of local bookstores in Ontario. And also, if you wanted to order directly from me, more of the proceeds go back to the children in Nepal then. So,
all right. And do you
just get in touch through my Facebook page, Patti Shales Lefkos on Facebook, or through my website, and I'll get back to you. And then I can mail them anywhere in Canada.
Perfect. So if you want a book from Patti, go to PattiShalesLefkos.com. That will be in the description, and it is on the screen right now as well. And people want to connect with you. Is Facebook a good way?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Message on Facebook. Yeah.
Brilliant. Patti, is there anything is there anything we missed, or any final words you'd like to say?
One thing is for Author Nation, it's really great to have a community of people that you can chat with about writing. And also to put yourself out there, because I know you have this monthly mingle where people can come and talk about books. Yes. And at the first monthly mingle I went to, he said, would anyone like to be put on the spot for the day? And I didn't even know what he meant. So I said, oh, sure. And nobody said. And by doing that, people found out about me. And also I got a connection to a great podcast to be on. And then I also got to come on with you again. So it's fantastic, So
yeah. Thank you, Patti.
Yeah, community is everything. It just and having people go over first drafts of things. I've learned to have a little bit of thicker skin because I learned a lot. The prologue of Grounded by Granite was gone over by 2 writing groups, and of course it was better after. So yeah,
brilliant. Patti, thank you for being part of Author Nation. I love having you there. And if you're looking for Patti's book, again, PattiShalesLefkos.com. And Patti, thank you for coming and joining us today. Really liked having you here.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us today at Author Nation. We are here to provide you with a path from idea to published book. And as Patti says, to help you hook you up with podcasts and whatever else you need to promote your book out. So join us and be surrounded by like-minded people ready to share their story, their expertise, and in doing so, change lives. You can find us at authornation.community. That is scrolling past you right now. And I will see you next week. We will be talking to Squeaky Cheese Productions, Kendra and Ralph, about everything you need to know about audio book recording. We will see you then.